Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's the second collab edition with me, co-host Darkened Hour, Adam Fitzgerald, as well as 9/11 investigative researcher, writer, and prolific interviewer of many high-profile authorities regarding the investigation 9/11, Leonardo Salvaggio. Hey, Leonardo, what's up, my brother?
Well, thanks for having me for the second time around. I'm pleased to be here with you again to discuss this very important topic so that we have to join forces, Adam, because we have to make sure that this is never forgotten.
Yeah, for sure. And it's probably my favorite subject of all. It's involving two incidents that are interlinked, and that is the Al Qaeda communications hub in Yemen, um, owned by Ahmed Al Hada, who owns a house in Sana'a, Yemen, the capital, and as well as the Al Qaeda summit meeting in Malaysia. And you'll see how this is the nexus of the understanding of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks and the failures of the domestic intelligence services of the CIA and NSA specifically. And in order to start, I always say to people, in order to know what happened in the present, you have to go back in the past and put in a timeline of events that led to a specific incident in the present, and to get a better understanding of how to prevent it in the future. Um, so, in order to go back, how did the intelligence services basically find out about this meeting in Malaysia and about this house in Yemen? When I interviewed Michael Scheuer, the former chief of base station of Alex Station in 1996, he reaffirmed this old statement and claim regarding how the CIA was monitoring bin Laden even in the early 1990s, and also as well as the NSA. And the NSA always had a monitored line on bin Laden's satellite phones. And there was one number that kept calling it, and he kept calling it as well. And it was a high profile number. So they put a red flag on it. It was a number that was traced back to a house in Yemen, in the capital of Sana'a. And what they found out was this house, Leonardo, was that this house was owned by Ahmed Al Hada, who's actually an associate of Osama bin Laden back in the Afghan Soviet war days. And bin Laden had gave him residency in his house. So this house actually became like an Al Qaeda communications hub for worldwide messages. In other words, if there was an Al Qaeda operative in a country like Syria or Egypt, and they needed to pass like an electronic message to somebody in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan, well, they will call this house first and speak in code, because the phone numbers in Egypt and Syria were actually monitored by the intelligence services of those countries. So they really couldn't talk outright. So they spoke in code to Ahmed Al Hada, who knew about the code, or they would send letters to the house. And then Ahmed Al Hada and anybody living at this house, you actually pass that letter over to the person that the person in Syria or Egypt were contacting. So you get a better understanding of what this house entailed. So here we have the NSA monitoring this house, and the CIA found out about it because the CIA detailee and analyst had actually worked with the NSA detailing this operation. And so this CIA analyst went back to Michael Scheuer. He was the chief of the Bin Laden issue station. And he actually went to Signals director at the time, Bob McNamara, about sharing information regarding what the NSA had learned, because the NSA could hear the phone calls incoming and outgoing. Now, the CIA had managed to put in a bug inside the house because they only heard outgoing messages, but they couldn't hear incoming. And the NSA wasn't willing to share the transcripts, and they got into a big fight, Leo. This was a huge issue. And the NSA won outright. Usually that's rare because Michael Scheuer is known as someone who doesn't like the word no. And so this is how the NSA and the CIA had found out about the Yemen hub itself. And I know you've done prolific work. You're one of the few, actually. In fact, I probably can name regretfully, a handful of people that talk about this issue. Um, how important of an issue was this regarding the Yemen hub? What do you know about this issue itself?
Well, you already said a lot, so the picture that you gave is pretty complete. I think that there's something we can add as details. For instance, that the guy who owned the house in Sana'a, Yemen, is a key character in this story, because it's not only an associate of Osama bin Laden's, but he's also the father-in-law of Khalid al-Midhar. And Khalid al-Midhar is probably the main character of all that we're going to discuss today. That is the switchboard in Sana'a, Yemen, and the summit in Malaysia. So this guy who was owning this house was Khalid al-Midhar's father-in-law, as I just said, and the phone that they were using was a satellite phone. It was using the Inmarsat number convention. Inmarsat doesn't exist anymore, but back then it did. And I've researched about it, and there's one point that I think it's still not clear. That is when the investigators found out about this switchboard. Because, okay, I can mention that the biggest source of information about this switchboard is this book by James Bamford called The Shadow Factory that dedicates to this case a whole chapter. And this same author is also featured in a very good documentary called The Spy Factory. And he says that the NSA found out about this switchboard in 1996. But there's also an article published on the New Yorker by high-profile author Lawrence Wright, that is the author of the most complete story of Al-Qaeda called The Looming Tower. Of course, it's so famous that there's also a TV series with that name based on his book. Says in that article published on the New Yorker that they found out about this switchboard 2 years after, in 1998. I don't know. I don't have a final answer so far. I don't know if you, in your researches, found out when that actually happened.
Yeah, look, I'm stuck with you, Leo. In fact, it goes switching from 1996 to 1998. I happen to think that it started in 1996 because that's how they found out about Bin Laden's satellite phone and the decryption of the phone by the NSA. Michael Scheuer, and I'll use his own quotes, quote, Bin Laden's satellite phone is a godsend because it gave us an idea not only of who he was in Afghanistan, or where Al Qaeda as an organization was established because they were closed at various places in the world in 1996, 1997, end quote. Now, I don't think there should be put too much stock in it regarding the time state, but what we can really discuss further is why this number was actually kept from the FBI to begin with. The FBI only found out because when they interviewed, this is something I'll just run through real quick. When they interviewed Mohammed al-Hali, who actually was the only survivor of the 1998 East Africa embassy bombings, he told the FBI agent, I think it was Jack Clunan, I believe, that went to visit him, or another FBI agent that went to visit him, and actually told him about the number that he called. And the number actually was 9671-200578, and nobody knew about this. Now, what blew me away, Leonardo, was this was unknown to me. I don't know if it was known to you, but I want to share this story. My fantastic co-host Richard Cox of the Darkened Hour, he found an article by the it was a British tabloid paper, I forgot, Guardian actually, and this number was publicly revealed in 1998 through the trial of al-Hali. And I was blown away because I see the article, it's 1998, and the number was publicly available. So in other words, the Yemen hub number was publicly available to anyone in 1998, which really, I can't believe they kept using the number. Well, regarding anyway, this number actually became prolific with Al Qaeda and associates like Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia. And just to fast forward a little bit, I always say to people, Al Qaeda is not like the rest of us. They don't talk about mundane things. They talk about operations. They talk about money transfers, wire transfers. So like the NSA basically amassed all this information. They kept transcripts of every single phone call. And Scheuer basically says the NSA had more information about Al Qaeda bin Laden than any agency in the world. And I happen to believe that because if they were getting calls every single day and they were getting transcripts every single day, the amount of data would have been enormous, Leo. I think, it would have been absolutely enormous. And according to the former senior executive of the NSA, Thomas Drake, he basically said that the reason why the NSA couldn't share this information in time was that they didn't read the information because there was so much of it. I don't know whether that's the truth or not, but I have nothing to doubt Drake. I think Drake is the biggest whistleblower of my time. But nevertheless, this information could have prevented 9/11 because they were talking about 9/11 on the phones, I believe. But basically, Thomas Drake does reiterate the fact that all the 9/11 hijackers information about plane tickets and where they purchased them from was publicly known to the NSA as well. So in 98, bin Laden declares a fatwa. It's called the Declaration of Jihad against the Americans occupying the land of the two holiest sites. And he decreed this in, I believe it was February of 98 or spring of 98. I'm not too sure. Don't forget, I'm 54. I tend to forget here and there. So I'm not too strict with the information these days. But from that fatwa, it basically extended the war to all Americans and Jews worldwide. And Al Qaeda began their invigilation against the United States and the West itself. Then in 1998, tons of information were leaning to this house in Yemen, and it begs to differ. How on earth could an operation like the U.S. Embassy bombings could be carried out, Leo? I'm at a loss for words. But what are your thoughts regarding this time period through the house itself, through Yemen, through Al Qaeda? Does it not fascinate you that this information should have been shared with, say, the CIA or the FBI? Maybe somewhere down the line, an operation like the embassy bombings maybe could have been prevented. And we see this repetitive in the future because 9/11 happened and then the U.S. Cole attack happened. And information that could have been shared that could have prevented these attacks seemed to be a recurrent thing, Leo.
Yes, absolutely. I think that this is the key thing that we should be aware of. It was not a matter of lack of information. It was a matter of lack of sharing the information.
Yeah.
Because I think that we have to keep in mind two other things. That first off, this information was not shared with the FBI, but it was shared with the Saudi secrets, with the Saudi intelligence service, which is even worse because they didn't share it with their American fellows, but they shared it with their Saudi colleagues. Can we say something like that?
Yes.
Which is pretty weird. And also, let's keep in mind that the CIA did something with that information because while the same terrorist that his name is escaping me now, Al-Midhar, Khalid Al-Midhar, was on. Yeah, Arab names are so difficult to remember.
I know.
They're because they all sound the same to us. So while Al-Midhar was on his way to Malaysia, these guys, the CIA folks, also entered in his hotel room in Dubai and took pictures of his passport. Therefore, it's incredible how many times they could have caught Al-Midhar and stopped 9/11, preventing it from happening, and they missed these opportunities. And so this is the story in a nutshell. That not only they didn't share it with the FBI, but they shared it with the wrong people, and that they did something with the information that they got, but they never shared the results with anybody. Why did they do it? We're not sure. I think that we can have two different hypotheses here. One is kind of reasonable. That is, probably they wanted to recruit these guys as informants. We'll never know. And the other one is the more human and down-to-earth hypothesis, that is maybe envy. Maybe they didn't want to share the information because of jealousy or something like that, or competition between two agencies. We'll never know for sure. And this is the most important stone that we still have to turn about 9/11.
Yeah, listen, Leo, I just want to harp on that because you raised a really important point and something that I'm really careful about. Look, we could play armchair quarterback and basically say the CIA wanted these attacks to happen for whatever perverted reason that they have. But I'm not willing to go there. I don't have evidence for that.
No,
And
me
so I'm
neither.
like using that as a point of entry. But you raise an interesting issue that I haven't thought about in a while, and that is miscommunication with the intelligence service for whatever reason. Look, I mean, like I said, we can speculate all we want, but I'd rather go with what we know instead, and then we can build on from there. It's good to have reasonable suspicion and reasonable speculation. But once you go up the reservoir, start making damning accusations, I think that's where the line should be crossed. Um, in regards to, oh, and by the way, just a small correction I made earlier. I said it was Jack Cloonan that visited Al Holly. It wasn't. It was John Anticept that was sent by John O'Neill. I just remembered that. So from here, the FBI basically learns about the Yemen hub number, and they think they struck gold. And so who do they share it with, Leo? This is the real irony of all this. They share with the CIA. not knowing that the CIA had already known about this number 2 years prior, allegedly. So the FBI doesn't even realize that the NSA and the CIA had already set up shop monitoring bin Laden and Al Qaeda, not just in Afghanistan, but also in Yemen. And soon, another big issue would be raised in December of 1999. And what happened in December of 1999 was that the NSA had learned about a phone call in December of 1999 between two people. One of them was a man in Malaysia. His name was Walid bin Atash, also known as Khalad. He's a high-profile Yemeni, high-profile scion within Al Qaeda. His family grew up with Al Qaeda, and he was basically a terrorist financier and facilitator. And on the other end of that line, there's a person by the name that you just mentioned, Khalid al-Mihdhar. And what the NSA had heard basically generally was that there was going to be a meeting in Malaysia, high-profile meeting, with many high-profile names, such as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Fahad al-Qusa, and other people that would attend. And this person basically told Khalid al-Mihdhar, who's married to the daughter of the owner, House Ahmed al-Hada, her name was Hoda al-Hada, to basically bring Nawaf al-Hazmi and his brother Salim al-Hazmi to this meeting. The NSA told the CIA told the FBI. Now, the reason why the NSA told the FBI was simple. NSA doesn't do human intelligence, also known as human. They do just strictly signals intelligence. What they wanted was for the CIA and the FBI to take pictures of the people coming in and out of this meeting. Well, the CIA does go, and they go between the dates of January 5th to January 8th of the year 2000, where the meeting was being held. And you had many high-profile people attending this meeting. Like I said, Fahad al-Qusa, Salim al-Hazmi, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Mihdhar. Later on, Zacharias Moussaoui is alleged to be involved. Ridwan Samuddin, who's also known as Hambali, the mad bomber of the Philippines and Indonesia. Yeah. So you had a lot of big, high-profile people that were talking about two operations allegedly, and that is the USS Cole bombing, USS Cole bombing, and the planes operation known as the 9/11 attacks. Now, it's alleged that the CIA had video camera at the ready, and Malaysian authorities took video of the people coming in and out of this meeting. Somehow, this tape is no longer existing or in the hands of the CIA or Malaysian authorities. It's lost. That's why I said alleged. But what the Malaysian authorities did have and passed it over to the Bin Laden issue station, codename Malik Station, run by Michael Scheuer, were the pictures of everybody that attended this meeting. And these pictures would become paramount to names and faces now known to the CIA. But by the way, the NSA, who entrusted the CIA to basically take pictures and send them over, did not do that even for the NSA. The FBI got screwed over by both. Information was barely leaked down to the FBI. They had nobody in Malaysia to basically monitor this meeting because they trusted the CIA to pass them this information, and they didn't. Again, Leo, huge mislaps here. I mean, like I said, we could go up the reservoir and say maybe they wanted these to happen. I'm not willing to go there, Leo. Basically, incompetence, malfeasance, yes, in the highest regards. Really, what are your thoughts about right up until this point? I mean, this is I know for you personally, because you talked about this issue many times. This is like, how the hell could they not pass this information to the federal authorities to have them warning about what's going on here?
Yeah, okay. So first off, I would like to, let's take one step back. So the first source of information about this meeting that we can have is the 9/11 Commission report, okay? So first, I would recommend everyone to read this book. Otherwise, you cannot say you know anything about 9/11. This is the first source of information. I think that one detail that we can add is that you mentioned this guy by the name of Khalad. And while on his way to Malaysia, his only goal was not being part of that meeting, because he also took a strange route, because he first landed in Bangkok and then he went to Hong Kong and then back from Hong Kong to Bangkok. And during those two flights, he did something weird, a sort of dry run of the of something that would have been useful on 9/11. This is not the only dry run, because we also had dry runs in the United States, but that's a totally different story. Maybe we'll make another episode about missed opportunities in the United States. So let's stick to Malaysia, Asia in this case. So what he did was, in his first leg from Bangkok to Hong Kong, he had a first-class seat close to the cockpit because he wanted to see if he could look inside. He didn't, but at least he tried. And on his way back from Hong Kong to Bangkok, he had a knife with him, a box cutter, the same weapon that was used by the hijackers on 9/11, 2001. And he went through the controls, and they only took a vague look at his bag. They opened his bag, but this box cutter was concealed, and the investigators or the airport personnel didn't see this weapon. He could bring this weapon with him as a handbag, and while flying, while on the plane, he also took it out, and no one complained, no one said anything. That was a sort of dry run of 9/11, because that's the first thing that they had to do, use their weapons. And while in Malaysia, they had this meeting in which they discussed 9/11, the USS bombing, and also other plans that were not finalized. For instance, they also mentioned vaguely something such as taking passengers as hostages. That never became real. They never did it. And still to this day, it's beyond me that they never shared this information with the FBI. And the only thing that we can think of is that maybe they have legitimate reasons not to do it because, well, in their minds, legitimate. Of course, we now know that it was a huge error not to do it. Such as maybe talk to these guys and recruit them and have information about even wider plans. And otherwise, we can only think that they did it because, they wanted to play the role of the big investigators, of the big guys, and they didn't want to share their successes with anybody else. We'll never know for sure. Oh, well, we don't know for sure so far.
Yeah, and this was actually talked about in the joint inquiry and the 9/11 commission, as you stated. However, the CIA wasn't very forthcoming about, sharing information. And in fact, I did a series and a podcast basically talking about how each of the CIA officials, from the counterterrorism center to the Bin Laden issue station, all basically gave differing answers as to why or how the FBI themselves basically got information from the CIA when they didn't really get any pertinent information at all. In fact, the CIA actually tells the NSA to put, like, say, for example, in the mid-January of 2000, the CIA told the NSA to put Khalid al-Mihdhar on its watch list. And this meant that the NSA could pass, communications to the CIA regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar. But they didn't tell that to, say, the Immigration Naturalization Service or over to the FAA, where Khalid al-Mihdhar basically probably couldn't even enter the country in the first place. They only tell him back in 2001, but it's too late because he comes back into Yemen. That's another story. But it basically it shields these agencies from having any complicity in malfeasance. And I think that's what the CIA was basically doing here in regard. I don't think they had, like, I'm willing to say with conviction that they didn't have sensitive information about the who, what, when, where, and why regarding the 9/11 attacks. I'm not willing to go there because we really don't have that information at our disposal publicly. Maybe we will one day, or maybe we won't. But nevertheless, they go to this meeting, this high-profile meeting, which is monitored by the NSA, the CIA, Malaysian authorities. Okay, after the meeting, it ends on January 8th. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi take, along with Khalid, go to Bangkok, and then from there, Khalid gets off. And Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi, who are still being monitored by the NSA and CIA, then travel to the United States. And according to Khalid al-Mihdhar, he thinks he's being followed, but he doesn't know for sure. Nevertheless, they probably were. So Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Hazmi land in the United States exactly on January 15th of 2000. There, they're met by a Tunisian cab driver by the name of Khalid Benarine, and then he drives them over to Fahad al-Tameri, the imam of the King Fahd Mosque. Now, the FBI has no knowledge of their arrival inside the United States. The CIA and the NSA definitely do. This meeting taking place was talking about high-profile terrorist events that were going to be completed and finalized on specific dates. This information was not shared with anybody outside of these agencies and outside of these men that were going to partake in these attacks. Now, here's the thing. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were known as al-Qaeda operatives. That's according to the CIA. They knew who these were because the Saudi intelligence, as you raised earlier, Leo, was known to them for years. Gun runners inside Saudi Arabia, they had files on these people, and basically they told the CIA about these two men. The CIA doesn't pass this on to the FBI. And then later on, we find out, of course, through our discussions with the ever-present whistleblower Mark Rossini, who we both have interviewed. And Mark Rossini tells us that this information was indeed kept from the FBI because when they tried to share the information with the FBI headquarters about the arrival in March of 2000, they were told not to share it. Why? That's the big question. Why did Alex Station, why did the Counterterrorism Center withhold this information from the FBI, from the State Department, from the FAA, from the INS, all these agencies that basically could have disrupted this cell that was beginning to form inside the United States, which later led to the arrival of people like Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, Ziad Jarrah, and of course the muscle hijackers that came a little bit later in 2001. I don't know. I really don't. It's been bothering me for years. Now, of course, people want answers, but what we have right now is mere speculation. But to this point, we do have some of those questions to answer with the new information that we got. But this meeting in Malaysia basically is the precursor, the beginning essence of the September 11, 2001 attacks. Leo, I pass it over to you. It's hardly ever talked about. Nothing that we mentioned here, from the Yemen hub to the Malaysia summit meeting, is ever spoken about. Very few people. In fact, it's more prolific, I think, maybe 20 years ago when Paul Thompson and Kevin Fenton and Kyle Hentz were talking about it. But today, it has basically, and this is a huge conspiracy because people love conspiracy, Leo, and this is hardly ever talked about. Why is that, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a huge question. No, I don't have an answer for that. I can tell you that for what I've seen in my experience is that conspiracy theories of a totally different nature were very big from like 2006 to 2010, 2011, maybe something like that. But people like, people like drama, people like intrigue. So people like to hear that the government is somehow responsible and that the story that they has been told was a lie, which of course in this case it's not true. Okay, but when dealing with complex things or legitimate mistakes or whatever, the attention winds down. People are not interested. Also, I mean, keep in mind that people who kept the discussion alive during those years, the big conspiracy theories years, were clearly, as I said in our previous episode, they're clearly not too smart. Therefore, I don't think they can follow a reasoning like this.
Yeah, and I just love the fact that there's so much to talk about here because just to give you an example, the NSA actually intercept 14 calls between the hijackers in the United States just in the early 2000s, in the summer of 2001. People like Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Salim al-Hazmi, later on Muhammad Atta, and like this information could have basically been shared with, say, the FBI or even the State Department, saying, "Hey, we got a location on these men," and they just didn't do it. And to me, that's mind blowing. Like, how does nobody talk about this? They, like I said, they love conspiracy, but again, they don't like intrigue. They don't like the buildup because it's too much work or it's reading too much. People like a simplified version of 9/11. I often say to myself, Leo, that sometimes I wish the truthers were right, because, I wouldn't be pulling my hair out for every detail that I missed or I've read about or trying to fact check. But through your experience, I mean, you've interviewed many high profile people involving the 93 attacks, the 2001 attacks. this summit meeting, this house in Malaysia, in Yemen, basically became the beginning nexus, so to speak, for the 9/11 attacks. And it's basically never talked about in regards in the seriousness that it deserves. And yet the figures that are involved, people like Ahmed al-Hada, Yazid Sufat, and as you mentioned, respectively, Khalid al-Midar, these are the people that basically were the conduits or the starting points for the terrorist attacks that the United States would basically undergo in the next couple of years. And so I would love to get an idea or maybe a push for a release of the transcripts by the NSA regarding the Yemen hub in the Yemen hub, and as well as maybe even later on the transcripts that were collected inside the United States by the NSA, and then maybe we can get the details. But as long as we have a trial that never started, Leo, we're not going to get anywhere. And so this is a big a roadblock in investigating 9/11. And I'm going to throw another huge question back at you, Leo. In your opinion, and you could basically just say whatever you want to say here. I know it's going to be a tough question for you, but in your opinion, do you think the NSA may have specifics in regards to certain terrorist attacks like the USS Cole bombing or the 9/11 attacks? Do you think Al Qaeda talked about that on the phones? Because I happen to believe that they did, but I can't prove it. What are your thoughts regarding it?
Well, I would definitely say so. Yes. I mean, everything seems to point in this direction. And to be honest, I would say, I mean, why not? Or what are other options would Al Qaeda have? So I would definitely think that they did. And NSA should have some evidence about it.
Yeah, and just to reiterate too, when the hijackers landed inside the United States, from the directions of Yazid Sufatan and others at the Malaysia meeting. And I'm pretty sure that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was directing that meeting because he's actually the representative of bin Laden and Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri and Mohammed Atef in Afghanistan, because he actually comes from Afghanistan to Malaysia. And from there, they talk about the failed, because we're also sidestepping another plot we could actually make a whole episode on, which is the Millennium bomb plot itself, where they would talk about the attack of a USS Sullivan's, which failed. And then later on, they made a new design plan for the USS Cole in Yemen. By the way, again, Yemen seems to be a hotspot. Anyway, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed directs Khalid al-Midar, the Wafa Hadmi, who, by the way, just happened to be selected as pilots along with Ramzi bin al-Shib originally. But because, just to go over this real quick, al-Midar and al-Hadmi become lazy and they don't go to English classes, and they're replaced by Hani Hanjour later, actually, to be the pilot for Flight 77. So al-Hadmi and al-Midar are basically the first two men, because it's important, and I'm glad you raised this point earlier, that Khalid al-Midar is central to all of this, because these two men, Nawaf al-Hadmi, Khalid al-Midar, are Al-Qaeda operatives. They're the only Al-Qaeda operatives, long-standing operatives out of the whole 9/11 operation. And so important are these two people that bin Laden chooses these two men first to become the agitators, the instigators of the 9/11 attacks. That's how important these two men were. And they're known to everybody. Like we said, Saudi intelligence, the NSA, the CIA, and God knows who else. And later on, the Israelis as well. But nevertheless, these two men come inside the United States uninterrupted, but yet monitored from afar by the two agencies, the NSA, CIA, and later on helped by Saudi intelligence. With the new information that we have, Leo, Saudi intelligence, Omar al-Bayoumi, Fahad al-Tamari, Osama Basnan, help facilitate, give these men finances, help them get driver's licenses. Leo, it's not a coincidence, is it?
No, definitely it isn't. And I think that one thing that we haven't said here yet is that the CIA haven't shared the information with the FBI, of course, but as I said previously, they did share it with the Saudis. Therefore, these people who intervened on the scene, who intervened and picked them up and gave them support, were Saudi agents, were Saudi Secret Service agents. Therefore, they were not like random Saudis like you and me helping out people because we understand that they are in need, okay? We have to keep in mind that somehow the Saudi intelligence was involved in this. Why? We'll never know for sure. Were they going to recruit them? Were they aware of what they were up to? Did Al Qaeda infiltrate the Saudi ministers, for instance, the Islamic affairs? We don't know for sure yet. And probably what we have to do is find this Omar al Bayoumi guy and hold him responsible for what he did. We'll never know for sure, but let's not forget that the Saudis were aware. Okay, so we said so far no one else was aware. No, somebody else was aware. The Saudis were aware, and this is even weirder.
Yeah, and this is and more information is going to come out soon. I'm pretty sure. I'm waiting for the. I think we're both waiting for the full version of the 60 minutes
Yeah.
episode regarding Omar Al Bayoumi inside Washington D.C., which is, my God, it was that mind blowing, and I'm so disappointed sometimes, Leo, how hardly anybody in alt media, the so-called defenders of free speech, defenders of civil liberties, didn't even begin to cover this information, much less the revelations in the Canistrell document. I'm just so disappointed. But and by the way, even without Midar and Al Hazmi inside the United States, Leo, the Yemen hub doesn't go away because, like I said before, right around the year 2000, I want to say like the spring, summer, or fall of 2000. I don't know when the period began, but there was like I said, 14 calls that were made from Khalid Al Midar, who was located now in San Diego. He relocated from Los Angeles, San Diego, to the Yemen hub run by Ahmed Al Hada. And basically, the NSA is listening to all of this. And basically, he's reporting information from San Diego to Yemen. And then those messages, like I said before, are going to who? Bin Laden, Dr. Ayman al Swahiri, Mohammed Atta, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and God knows who else. Calls that were made from that phone in San Diego to that line in Yemen was never shared with anybody outside of Saudi intelligence, you said, Leo, or even the FBI at this point, or even the damn State Department. And even though NSA analysts pick up finally Khalid, but they don't know his full name yet, but they learn about it, just like they learned later that Khalid is actually Khalid al-Midar, that Nawaf is Nawaf al-Hazmi, that Salim is Salim al-Hazmi, and that Khalad is Wali bin Atash. This information was never shared with even the CIA until later CIA finds out, but they never share with the FBI. They never share it with the National Security Council. They never share it with the members of the State Department or the principals team. It was actually either kept out because they only know what they are allowed to know or what they want to know. I don't know for sure. But Leo, it does seem that even with the beginning information in 2000, Leo, I'm willing to say, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. I'm willing to say that even with this information, had the FBI known just this, they could have detained Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi. And that's not me saying that. That's Rossini and Ken Williams of the Phoenix Memo and other FBI agents who have come out and basically said that we probably would have, and Ali Soufan says it, they basically would have detained these two men. And who knows, probably could have slipped and told the beans about the plane's operation. Leo, what are your thoughts regarding this? What do you think?
Well, that's just me and you speculating here. I would
Yes.
like to add two details before answering your question. First off, I think that the only media outlets who covered the Al Bayoumi video posted on YouTube by 60 Minutes are me, you, and our mutual friends, the Florida Bulldogs. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then the second thing I would like to add before coming to your question is that probably we should give them credit that something like 9/11 was so impossible to foresee that they definitely underrated the threat. Because keep in mind that an hijacker taking the controls of the planes were out of everybody's minds. So no one could have thought about it because classical traditional hijackings would have foreseen a terrorist pointing his gun at the head of the pilot. And that's what happened last time before 9/11, an American plane was hijacked, which was in 1992, if I remember well, from Addis Ababa to Frankfurt to New York City. So probably they could not think that these terrorists were up to something that big. We should give them credit for this, or at least put things in the right context. Coming to your question, would capturing Al-Midhar, would have it stopped 9/11? We don't know for sure. Definitely something would have changed, but would that stopped it totally? We don't know, because we still had three teams that would have been allowed to do what they were up to. And let's also keep in mind that somehow Al-Qaeda plans were probably wider. For at least, I mean, I have a few episodes in my mind. First off, United 93 didn't reach its goal because of the passengers' revolt. So this didn't go right for Al-Qaeda. Then they had like 50 other terrorists who were recruited, and for some reasons, these guys were stopped. They either dropped off the plan, they were caught, something like that. If you read the 9/11 Commission report, and also one of the monographs, these books say it clearly. A lot of Al-Qaeda terrorists were stopped before they could join the plan. And let's not forget that the 20 hijacker could not join the rest of the team because it was stopped in Orlando, Florida. So Al-Qaeda definitely had to face some difficulties in planning their plan. So would Al-Midhar being jailed have stopped the whole plan? We don't know for sure. Probably
Yeah,
not.
right. I would agree with you to this point. I don't know if they would have stopped it because there was so many other options. And you bring up a really fantastic point. The How they were caught up because martyrdom hijacking was not in the plans, even regarding to airline industrial safety. For example, I read a safety report in the year 2000 regarding hijackings, and even back then, you had a plot called the Bajinka plot, which you remember in 1996 was headed by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed Ramzi Youssef, the bomber of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, where they were going to put bombs on 12 airliners and have them all explode over the Pacific, the assassination of Pope John Paul II in the Philippines. And it was a hidden plot that was revealed by Abdul Hakim Murad, was that they were going to hijack 10 planes to crash them over the intercontinental United States, with Abdul Hakim Murad actually piloting the plane and crashing into CIA language. This was huge news at the time, but they didn't act on it. And they had 5 years to basically make stricter security measures regarding, martyrdom hijacking. It was actually brought up in the 9/11 Commission. Bob Kerry actually is yelling at the assistant manager of the FAA, Monty Belger, saying that you knew about martyrdom hijacking even in 1996, but they didn't prepare for it. Now, well, according to Monty Belger, was basically saying that, well, we thought there would be martyrdom hijackings outside the United States. But again, Kerry tells him, reminds him, he goes, what made you think that? He goes, they were preparing to attack inside the United States. They gave him a whole list of attacks that didn't materialize, but they were trying to. And I'm like, thinking, Leo, wow, even if they just, shared that information or acted on that information, maybe they could have prevented the attacks. But again, you bring up another great point. The plot was so huge, there was so many people involved that we probably could have never gotten in time. How they got on these planes and when they got the pilot keys from the stewardess themselves. I mean, like I said, you said himself, we could speculate all day long here. And I don't like to do that because it misleads into other directions and, really doesn't go anywhere because it's all mere speculation anyway.
Maybe they had
But
spares. We don't know.
yeah, well, that's a great point. I didn't even think of that. Maybe they did. And again, I don't know either. But it's fun, just to end it on here, Leo, this issue regarding, and I'm glad you wanted to do this because I love this issue because it's barely ever talked about. And it's so important for people to know about how the 9/11 attacks were originally formed. And it came from the Yemen hub itself, which is the nexus of Al Qaeda throughout the world in terms of messaging, and then you had this high profile meeting that was known to the NSA and CIA, just like the Yemen hub itself. And it really bothers me, Leo, and I'm sure it does bother you too, because you're maybe one of five people left that I know that does consistent investigative work on 9/11 itself, and nobody got in trouble. Nobody got fired for this. And even the 9/11 Commission, Joint Inquiry, they got close because Carl Levin, did at least criticize certain people within the CIA, but nobody talked about the NSA. Nobody. And the NSA, according to the CIA, it was the gold mine of data. Your final thoughts on this?
Well, I don't really have final thoughts on this because I think that you're totally right, that no one is being held responsible for this. And we still don't know the reason. Probably the reason is that somehow nobody wants to embarrass the Saudis. And if these guys were to be held accountable for what they did, of course, the whole thing, the whole story would get to the point of clarifying what the role of the Saudis was. And I think that no American administration wants to do it, nor Obama, nor Clinton, nor Bush, nor Trump, nor Biden. Nobody wants to do it because the Saudis are still so powerful that no one wants to embarrass them. Let me add something as my final thoughts. So I remember reading in 2013 this fantastic article by Peter Bergen, which is called "Would NSA Surveillance Have Stopped the 9/11 Plot?" In 2013, that is halfway between today and 9/11, Peter Bergen said that the problem of lack of communication between agencies was still in place, was still there. And in this article, he mentions a few events of the close past of, say, year 2008, something like that, in which miscommunication between agencies led to attacks being conducted still 10 years after 9/11. Let's not forget that also something of the sort happened that same year, 2013, with the Boston bombings, because the Russian and the American agencies talked to each other, but there was a problem with the transcription of the name of the two terrorists, because I believe that someone used to write Tsarnaev as ZE and the other ones as TSE, something like that. So they could not match the information and understand that the people they were after was the same guys. So we should understand what happened in the last 10 years, because 10 years ago, the situation was still pretty scary.
Yeah. And, we could really end it right there, because basically all we have left is mere speculation from here. And like I said, it can lead down to many roads, but then again, that's all it is. So it's basically our own opinions that aren't proven yet. So, Leo, we're going to end it right here, right now. And you have another episode upcoming in September you want to redo. Why don't you tell the audience about what the upcoming episode is going to entail?
So, well, I'm going to LA in 2 weeks, and I would like to go see the restaurant where these guys met in Culver City. Let's see if I make it. Let's see if it's interesting. I want to see maybe the mosque from outside. I don't think I can go in. I would like to tell you and your viewers about this. But let's touch base before that episode airs and see if I have, first off, if I make it to go to those places, and if I have enough information to share. We'll see. This is what we're planning at the moment. Yeah.
Right. And by the way, the two places he's talking about is the Mediterranean Cafe, where it was alleged that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wapa Hazmi met with Omar al-Bayoumi and his associate Kaysan Bindan. And of course, the King Fahd Mosque run by Fahad al-Damari in Culver City, Los Angeles. I hope you get to go there. I have never seen up-to-date pictures of either of these areas, and I would love to see it. And I think the only other person that I know that visited, either the restaurant or the mosque was another fellow 9/11 researcher, prominent podcaster himself, blogger himself, Nelson Martin's DJ Thermal Detonator. He's
Okay.
the only person I know of that has ever visited there. But you would be if you can get video of it, this would be monumental because I'd never seen it before. Leo,
Hope so.
Leo, any final thoughts today?
Well, we have to keep doing our research because we need to shed some light on what happened. And as I mentioned, halfway through this video, it's very few people doing this right now. It's me, you, and the Florida Bulldog. So let's keep doing the good work.
Yeah, let's keep doing that. So great talk with you, Guy.
My
Leonardo
pleasure.
Salvaggio, please go visit. I'm going to put all his links underneath the description. Go visit. And guys, have a great weekend. Leonardo, I'll see you in a month.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.